Now, the question that we have to ask, Eric, draft pick or playoff berth? Draft pick or playoff berth? Because here's what inevitably has happened to the Lions. We now have to root for the Rams to beat the Seahawks, the Baker Mayfields of Los Angeles, to beat the Seahawks, which will inevitably affect our first draft pick in April. But it also helps on the back end with a potential playoff berth. So my question to you is, which is more important? Is the higher draft pick, so Seattle beating the Rams and we end up where we end up in the top 5, top 6, more important? Or is them beating the Seahawks, us beating the Packers, and getting into the playoffs more important in your mind? This is Don George says playoff berth. Ricky says draft pick. Calvin says let's go playoffs. What are your thoughts?
I'm looking at this from a couple different perspectives. For me, I feel like if this was somehow a situation where the Lions could be hosting a playoff game at Ford Field, I would say give me the playoff berth. While I believe the Lions could, and this is if they only see Minnesota, they somehow see the Niners in the first round, I don't like our chances at all. But you see Minnesota on the road and beat them, that's cool. But I want that satisfaction at home from a fan perspective.
You're not getting it, so take that out.
Exactly. So since that's not going to happen, I'm on the side of the draft pick. I feel like it's not going to move a whole lot because based on how the teams are that are ahead of the Rams right now in the draft, it's the Colts who play the Texans, who have been trying to win a lot lately. I don't understand. The Cardinals are ahead of them, but they play the Niners. They're probably not going to win that game. The Broncos play? The Chargers. They're not going to win that game. And I think it's one more team that I'm forgetting that could move. So potentially they could get into the top 5, which to me would make me happy because you at least, I wanted them to walk away with one of these 3 D linemen. If you can somehow, I don't think they're going to get Will Anderson. Jalen Carter's not going to happen. But I really like Miles Murphy from Clemson. If you can get him at number 5, I'd be super happy with that. And I think you have the best chance being at 5. And for me, I do have a lot of faith in Brad Holmes to make the right choices. I don't think this playoff berth, it's not fulfilling enough for me to forego and forget about better draft positioning for this team. So I'm all in on the draft pick at this point, honestly.
I respectfully disagree. Respectfully disagree. And there's a number of reasons why I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
You are already ending up with a top 10 pick regardless, which is good. Okay. Now, does that mean that you're necessarily going to get one of those defensive linemen? No, that does not mean that.
No.
But whether you pick 6 to 10, okay, let's give it that range. That is 100% dependent upon what the teams 1 through 5 do for you in the draft. Okay. Who thought Penei Sewell was going to fall to 7?
Not a lot.
Okay. Also, at pick 217 in last year's draft, we found James Houston. I think as a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick, we found Amon-Ra St. Brown. We got Malcolm Rodriguez in the 6th round. I trust Brad Holmes with a top 10 pick, not a you can't mess up top 3 pick. I'm putting my faith in Brad Holmes to make the best selection wherever that Rams pick lands. And adding to that, the fact that who is the nucleus of the Lions team right now? The rookies that have been drafted last year and the second-year players that Brad Holmes has drafted. Those are the guys making the plays. Houston, McNeil, Hutchinson, Kirby Joseph, right? They need playoff experience. They need playoff experience.
They need it this year?
They need it this year. And I'll tell you why. Because there is validity to the idea of learning how to win. Gaining experience and let experience being a teacher so that you can then understand. We may go into Minnesota and we may lose by 2 touchdowns, but we were there. And we have a group of guys and a nucleus of guys who are the playmakers that experienced that.
Even if they get waxed by 2 touchdowns?
That doesn't matter. They were there. The lights were brighter. The fans were louder. And And as one of my friends pointed out, it also gives Dan Campbell a year of playoff coaching under his belt where inches matter, where seconds matter. In a season where you're not expected to do anything in the playoffs, which is fine. I'm not expecting a Super Bowl, but what I do want is that extra year of playoff experience, because in 2023, if you draft like you've been drafting and they perform like they've been performing, this team is your NFC North champions. There's no doubt about that. There's no team better in the NFC North than the Detroit Lions going into 2023.
Okay, so let me ask you a
And
question.
so, hold on, I'm not done.
Oh.
So, with that bold take, because I think that, of course, barring injury, but this team is the best team in the NFC North, and I think they've proved that over the last 9 games. They've won 7 out of 9. They beat Minnesota. They've handed the Bears their butt twice, because the first time was by 1 point at Soldier Field, and they have a chance to sweep Green Bay. You take this team, give them a little bit of playoff experience, and then you roll into 2023 with some holes filled, another year of coaching under Dan Campbell's belt, and some playoff coaching experience. That might be a force to be reckoned with, my friend.
It could be a force to be reckoned with without that. Like, let me ask you a question. Okay, so we've agreed that basically these last closing 4 games that they played are essentially playoff games. Don't you think they're playing with more house money in the playoffs compared to playing against Green Bay, especially if Seattle loses this coming week?
Yes, but again, your game on Sunday night is essentially like a playoff game. I agree with you.
Okay.
But it is not a playoff game. It's that extra week of preparation. It's that extra heightened sense of every little thing mattering in that first round playoff game. And getting these young guys that experience, it matters. It matters. I talked to one of my buddies who's a professional athlete, and I straight up asked him this question.
Baker Mayfield?
It's not Baker Mayfield. It's not even a football player. But I asked him, I go, as a professional athlete, is there something to the idea of learning how to win? Of getting there and getting experience? And he said, 100%. There's no doubt about that. He goes, it's being in that situation and knowing, okay, I've got to find something within myself to get over this hump, or I take what I learned from that playoff experience and then incorporate it into my preparation for next year. It's all that playoff experience. So they're not required, as Ricky said. I'm with you. But at the same time, you cannot replicate the experience that they will get from a first round playoff game. You can't replicate it in practice or anywhere else.
But this is, I think you're missing something though, because yes, playoffs are important, but I think the experience that they're getting is big game experience. Now, while playoffs may be bigger, these games that they're playing right now, you can't get into the playoffs without winning and playing good right now. You can make an argument that these are more important. And I think them getting that taste in their mouth, whether it's through victories or getting punched in the mouth against the Panthers where they didn't show up, I feel like that is serving a big growth for these young players in playoff situation where they're not even expecting them to be there. And even if they get in, you expect them to get further than the first round or second round? I'm not. And like, I don't think that's necessarily needed for rookies who are already playing in big games, who are weathering the storms of adversity that they created on their own and through their coaching staff. And they're learning, like you said, what it takes to win. But I don't think playoffs has to be a definition of that. Now, for me, because I have somebody specific that I want in mind with Myles Murphy, that's why I want the pick specifically at 5. I'm with you. I trust Brad Holmes to make the right call with wherever they land. But I want to see that D-line as strong as possible as the identity of their defense. And with the talent that's up there that high, I think that serves better for the next 5 to 10 years than one playoff bid, which may not even do nothing for them. What if they don't make the playoffs next year? Like, the NFL is kind of like up in the air sometimes. It's not a guarantee that, okay, because they snuck in this year, they're guaranteed to be back next year. So, like, I just think they need to focus on building correctly. And I think that goes with the foundation of their roster construction.
I agree with you. And I think there's validity to that.
Right.
But you have also heard, and we've also had, and it's a different scale because, right, it's college football versus NFL football.
Right.
But JJ McCarthy, right? He's even said last year when we got to the playoffs, it was different. This year we've been there and we know what to expect. Now the result wasn't different. They still lost, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But there's something to being there. And that's what I'm trying to get across, right? Like is I feel like, yes, you're 100% right. Understanding how big and important these last 4 games have been and learning to win within those games,
Yes.
massively important.
Huge.
But that's like second tier compared to the first tier of actually being in a playoff atmosphere.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Like, okay, yeah, we've learned experiences tiered out, right? You got your regular season. Now you got your meaningful regular season games that are going to get you into the playoffs in tier 2. Okay, now we need that next level of experience in tier 1, actually being in a playoff game, understanding that the crowd's going to be louder, understanding that seconds matter more, understanding that inches matter more. And yeah, do I think that they get into the playoffs and then are blown out in the first round? Not at all, actually. I don't. Especially if they go to Minnesota. They've proved that they can win in Minnesota as long as they don't kick a 53-yard field goal and give up 2 double-digit leads. And Minnesota's the biggest frauds in the NFL as
No question.
we know it.
No question.
So to me, the playoff experience, going to a hostile environment, because Minnesota is a tough place to play, and getting that experience for these young guys, who somebody brought up contracts a little bit earlier, right? We only have a short amount of time left. Sewell has 2 years left after this one.
Right.
Amon-Ra has 3 years left, I think, if we pick up
Right.
his 5th-year option.
Okay.
So that's a very short window.
I get that.
And so you got to capitalize on that. And again, I'm going to keep reiterating. Yes, the player experience is nice, but also getting MCDC some playoff experience before this team has its holes filled is never going to be a bad thing. And yeah, I would sacrifice picking 8th instead of 5th to get him that experience.